There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. The Honorable, the Chief Whip.
Honorable Speaker, I move that the House, notwithstanding Rule 29, which provides for the sequence of proceedings, give precedence before notices of motion, motions without notice, and members' statements to the debate on higher education transformation and introduction of bills by the Minister of Finance as they appear on the order paper. I so move.
I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections agreed to. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Debate on higher education transformation.
The Honorable the Minister of Higher Education and Training.
Madam Speaker, Cabinet colleagues, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Higher Education and Training, honorable members, today is the birthday. Oh yes, and the students, you are right this time. Today is the birthday of our late giant, ANC President Ora Tambo, as well as that of the late Jabulani Mzala Nxumalo, ANC cadre and communist till the end. On this day, also in 1992, the then Deputy Chair of the ANC Midlands region, Comrade Reddy Khateb, was killed in an ambush in KwaZulu-Natal. I give this ministerial statement today in their honor and memory. My department welcomes the announcement by President Zuma that there will be no fee increase in the 2016 academic year in our universities. This has helped to bring to a close discussions and negotiations I had opened with all the stakeholders at the beginning of last week and earlier. This decision will bring the much-needed monetary relief, especially to poor, working-class and lower-middle-class families with university students. I also welcome the show of unity and common purpose from the academic community, students, academics, support and management staff to demonstrate a commitment to making higher education more accessible. Unless key stakeholders take up the struggle for transformation, government alone will not succeed in these efforts. The meeting between the President and university stakeholders also agreed to take forward discussions on all other matters raised by the protesting students and workers. Perhaps the three most urgent are the issue of free university education, institutional autonomy and public accountability, and thirdly, bringing support staff at our universities back onto university payrolls and liberate them from labor brokers. Resolving these will build upon the many agreements struck at the Higher Education Summit that my department convened on the 15th to the 17th of October 2015 at eThekwini, at which Professor Pozzoli was a part. We as government are already working full steam on implementing our side of the President's agreement, and we believe the Vice Chancellors are too. We call on all students to stick to their side of the agreement and resume the academic programs in all of our institutions. And we wish to congratulate those students who have gone back to class after the agreement on Friday. Disrupting end-of-the-year examinations will have a devastating effect not only on our system, but also in the lives of thousands of individual students and their families. What is the nub of the matter we are dealing with here? The nub of the matter is that we are victims of our own successes as the ANC government over the last 21 years. The funding allocation to universities from the fiscus increased by 30% between 2004-05 and 2015-16, from 9.8 billion rands to 30.38 billion. But between 1994 and 2014, we doubled the number of students in higher education. This huge increase saw larger numbers of poor students entering the university system. Today, we are sitting with about 1 million university students, of which about 72% are Black African, 6% colored, 5% Indian, and 58% women. The increase in financial contribution, however, has not risen in line with the increase that we have had. But in this is what has increased the reliance of our universities on student fees. But in this context, we have to closely examine whether universities themselves are spending their monies, including those with reserves, prudently, and indeed whether they are prioritizing transformative programs. We could not cap fees because we are not legally entitled to do so. However, and as part of investigating and dealing with the totality of cost drivers in the university sector, government will have to set up a regulatory mechanism for fee increases as resolved by the African National Congress National General Council. As the ANC government, we know the challenges facing our students and communities because these are our children that we care for deeply. And we are dealing with these challenges and problems. Precisely because we knew of the expensive nature of higher education, we set up the National Student Financial Aid Scheme to support students who are academically capable but coming from poor families. We know the problem, we have the answers as the African National Congress. NSFAS provides loans upfront to poor students, interest-free for the duration of their studies, and converts a large portion of the loan to a bursary for students who successfully complete in the expected time. Successful graduates are expected to start paying back their loans once they are employed and earning a salary above 30,000 rands per annum. The scheme provides funding for tuition as well as accommodation and other basic costs. Since its inception, at the insistence of President Mandela in 1991, in the form of the Tertiary Education Fund for South Africa, NSFAS has awarded 50.5 billion rands to approximately 1.5 million poor students in universities and more recently TVET colleges as well. And most of these students, overwhelmingly, their parents have never seen the door of a college or a university. Funding from the department was 2.6 billion in the 2011-2012 financial year and will increase to 4.3 billion in the 2016-2017 financial year. Allocations have increased from 578 million to 4.909 billion from 2004-05 to 2015-16, a 602% increase. Since 2009, we have increased the total number of students supported by 44.2%. From the 2012 academic year to the 2015 academic year, the average full cost of study increased by 32.4%. The average NSFAS award increased by 48.7% in the period. We have also attempted to reverse other shortfalls in terms of infrastructure because indeed we are victims of our own successes. For example, we have recently released about 1.7 billion rands into the system as a whole for student accommodation, the bulk targeted as historically black campuses. To implement the 2007 Polokwane resolution of the ANC on fee-free education for the poor, I convened a ministerial working group which reported in 2013. This is the famous report which has been much mentioned in the past week as having been suppressed by me and my department. In fact, the main contents of the report was circulated to all the stakeholders and tabled in various decision-making structures, both inside government and in the ANC's National Executive Committee, Makotla.
Honorable Speaker.
Order. What is the issue, Honorable Member?
Yes, Honorable Speaker, I just want to check whether the Honorable Minister will be prepared to take a question.
Do you want to take a question, Honorable Minister?
If I have time at the end, Honorable Speaker. Not now. It has not been suppressed, this report. Two key issues exposed were raising the threshold of eligibility for NSFAS support and providing full support for cost of attendance for poor students. Detailed modeling of various options were developed, and the report suggests that an additional amount of 37 billion rands in 2011 rand value is required in the baseline over the 2016-2017 to 2018-2019 medium-term expenditure framework to cover the full cost of study loans for poor and working class students. In the absence of that amount of money being available in the fiscus, we have made various interventions, such as a possible loan scheme for the students identified as falling through the cracks that would not require sureties from parents. In 2013 and 14, a large cohort of students eligible for NSFAS loans were enrolled at various universities with the understanding that additional funds would be secured from various sources to settle their debts. And we have coordinated a process of quantifying the NSFAS funding shortfalls for the 2013 and 2014 academic year across all universities. And cheers to that. We have also instituted various measures to improve administration, find additional funds, improve recovery so that more students can be supported, and improve on policies governing the allocations of funds, as well as root out possible fraud and corruption. We changed the interest accumulation, which used to kick in from the inception of the loan, to initiating it 1 year after graduation, because as the ANC, we are the only ones who know the problems, and we are the only ones who are capable of providing answers.
On a point of order, Speaker. Order. Minister, you must sit down. When I call a point of order, you need
Honorable Member,
you need to sit down.
Honorable Member, if
Honorable
you want
Speaker.
a point of order, you wait for the chair to recognize you, and you can then take the floor.
On
Go
a
on,
point
what's the
of
point of order?
Speaker, the minister must not take his podium and mislead the nation in this
No,
house.
Honorable
He
Member,
knows
that's
very
not-
well.
That's not a
that
point of order.
He knows very well that what the ANC is having right
Honorable
now
Member,
is plan
take
after
your
plan.
seat.
The country needs free education.
Honorable
You must
Member.
not ever take a stand and mislead the nation. You are misleading us.
Honorable Member, please proceed, Minister.
The honorable member can raise a point, but we have no power to instruct me to sit down whatsoever.
Point of order.
Let me briefly,
Point of order.
What's the point of order,
The
Honorable
point
Member?
of order is that even yourself, you can't address the member directly. What we are saying is that we are
Honorable
not telling
member.
this nation the truth. That is why
Honorable
today
member,
the students
take your
are
seat.
on the street fighting for free quality education.
Can you
It's
take
because
your seat,
government has
honorable
actually
member?
failed to give the students free quality education. That's all what we want to hear today.
Honorable Member, take your seat.
Don't mislead the nation.
Please proceed, Honorable Minister.
let me briefly inform the House of my actions over the past few weeks. As contrary to what my detectors say, I have not been absent. I have been engaging the Vice Chancellors and other stakeholders on the issue of fees for some time. The week before last, I set aside 3 days to meet with representatives of the university community on a wide number of issues at the Durban
Point
Summit.
of order, Honorable Speaker. Point of order, Honorable Speaker.
What's the point of order, Honorable Member?
The minister knows very well that he's not telling the truth. For the past 2 weeks, we have
Honorable
seen
member,
protests through higher education
that is
institutions.
not a
the
point
minister
of
must
order.
the minister must not derail this debate.
Honorable
You must
Member,
not derail this debate.
take your seat, Honorable Member. Please
The week
proceed,
before
Honorable
last, as I
Minister.
said, I was at the Durban Summit and held an additional meeting with student representatives on the sidelines of the summit. When it became apparent that students nationally were embarking on protest actions, I immediately called a meeting of vice chancellors, worker leaders, and national student leadership last Tuesday, and have continued to engage with the stakeholders until the president made the announcement on Friday.
On a point of order. What's the point of order?
The minister must not deal with stakeholders. Students are clear. He must be very much speaking to them.
Honorable
He must-
Member, that's not a point of order.
He cannot be dealing
It's
with
not a
stakeholders.
point
He
of
must
order.
deal with
Please take your seat.
students.
Madam Speaker and honorable members, to resolve the immediate shortfall of an estimated 2.6 billion rand required to cover the 0% fee increase, we are working out exactly what different sectors will contribute together with the Minister of Finance. The details will be announced on Thursday afternoon after a meeting with the President. From our side, we have identified sources of funds that can be reprioritized, obviously not at a cost to our other planned programs, although some will be affected. The wealthier universities have committed to make a contribution. In the long term, nevertheless, we estimate that an appropriately funded higher education sector, based on our current funding formula in terms of international comparable benchmark funding levels, would require an additional 19.7 billion rand per annum in the baseline for university subsidies, excluding NSFAS, with an annual increment for inflation and enrollment growth to meet the NDP targets. In the last week, many different funding models have been touted, including greater contribution from the private sector, a wealth tax, a graduate tax, or an increase in the skills levy or prescribed assets and others. Some of these we have explored in the past, others are somewhat new. We are open to exploring all possibilities that have a transformational impact. However, we need to be careful about raiding the skills levy money all the time, as that could amount to robbing the poor to pay the poor. The skills levy money is desperately needed to train workers and provide skills training to millions of youth and adults that are either unemployed or in a variety of vocational or short skills programs and adult education programs. On the 60th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, We must ensure that the doors of learning and culture are open to all. And we commit ourselves to going even beyond the call in the Charter, because the call in the Charter says higher education and technical training and scholarships will be awarded on the basis of merit. Our country, I would like to argue, has enough money to support free higher education for the poor. But the problem is that more resources are in the private sector than in the government fiscus. My own considered view is that government must have the political will to tax the rich and the wealthy to fund higher education. None of us must develop cold feet about the necessity of taxing the rich to fund our children. In conclusion, Madam Speaker,
What's the issue, Honourable Member?
Can I address in terms of Rule 50?
About what, Honourable Member?
I think the minister is not actually relevant to the discussion of today, because
No, Honourable Member.
the
Honourable
crisis in the
Member.
country is all about the fees. That must
Honourable
actually
Member,
fall.
please take
We
your
thought
seat.
that the minister is going to say that from today going on,
Honourable
all
Member,
universities will be
take
free.
your seat. Let
They'll
the
never be
Minister
charged.
finish his speech. Honourable Minister, please finish.
I think he must address that, Speaker.
Madam
Can he
Speaker,
please do so?
Madam Speaker and honourable members, we need to always bear in mind as I conclude that the struggle for access to quality higher education is simultaneously a struggle against poverty and inequality. Our late leader Nelson Mandela's words must remain our guide in this regard, and I quote, "Overcoming poverty is not a task of charity, it is an act of justice. Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. Sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. You can be that great generation. Let your greatness blossom." Thank you very much.
The Honourable Gina.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. And let me greet honourable ministers in the House, honourable members, people in the gallery. Honourable Speaker, let me first appreciate and welcome the decision to put this debate on higher education transformation. Let me repeat that, Honourable Speaker. The debate that we are on today is on higher education transformation, and in no way where we can be narrow and talk on one issue, whereas when we look at higher education, we need to talk on the transformation of the sector as a whole. Let me thank you, Honourable Speaker, for putting this on the agenda today of this august House. There could be no better time to debate the matter before us than now. This debate comes 9 days after the Minister of Higher Education and Training convened a second National Higher Education Summit to take stock of progress on 2010 Higher Education Summit resolutions and current transformation and challenges in the sector and the way forward. This shows that indeed, this debate is not only the reaction on the national shutdown by the students, but it's there to make the stock of what is happening in the sector as a whole. Government is hard at work, trying to find ways of accelerating transformation in the higher education sector and noting with how some of the institutions use autonomy as a weapon against transformation. Minister, we commend you for taking such a bold step, and we will monitor the implementation of the resolutions of the summit that has just taken place. The National African Congress, through its policies and legislative framework, has guaranteed and endorsed the principle of institutional autonomy. In its yellow book, a policy framework for education and training, it stated that autonomy relates to the policies which government which govern the overall running of the institution, their general direction in the relation to the development strategies, and hence issues such as specialization and differentiation. Higher education institutions must have a high degree of autonomy and determining their affairs balanced with the need for the monitoring, evaluation, and public accountability of the higher education system, especially in relation to redress of inequalities, quality of provision, and the efficient utilization of resources. In determining government policies in the post-1994 establishment of the democratic system, the concept of institutional autonomy was further explored in the National Commission on Higher Education. This report concluded, I quote, "Cooperative governance offers a strong steering model with a planning role and a strong coordination role, which provides for increased and stronger government and stakeholders' participation, as well as expect input from the sector. The model shows that the model allows for the mobilization of policy of implementation capacity outside government. A fundamental tenet is that stakeholders will participate in policy development and structures and mechanisms and should put into place to give effective to this." I close quotes. With the White Paper 3, a program for the transformation of higher education endorses the cooperative governance model as a policy for South African higher education system, based on the principle of autonomous institution working cooperatively with a proactive government in a range of partnerships. And this autonomy, remember, it also it calls for the additional responsibility of the institution in mobilizing for more resources for those institutions to run. Despite this policy provision, one of the current challenges in the governance of higher education institutions in South Africa has been to find the above balance proposed by the National Commission on Higher Education in a cooperative governance model. On one hand, government has tended to rely and put faith on the legislative multi-stakeholder councils, which are supreme governing bodies on the individual institution, to correctly interpret and apply this concept. By so doing, government, which according to the National Commission of Higher Education is the main role player, has lessened its authority and powers, which it should exercise in a transparent, equitable, and accountable manner, and in all the pursuit of the public good. On the other hand, the respective councils has tended to shift from the national transformation imperatives and tended to view themselves as completely autonomous of government. They tended to confine the role of government to be strictly supervisory and not the driver of higher education towards the attainment of social and economic development of the country. Hence, when we see the department coming in, we get the sayings that the minister is intervening, and when he pulls out, we get that the minister is absent. So that is the balance that we need to strive on this issue of autonomy. These councils have ignored the fact that the council is on transformative agenda, and we cannot afford the legacy of exclusion and marginalization to continue after 20 years of democracy. Some of these councils are just paying lip services to the country by developing transformation charters and plans of compliance, but without any intention of implementing them. There are many recommendations made in the report of the Ministerial Committee on Transformation and Social Cohesion and the elimination of the discrimination in the public higher education institution. It had to take students to develop a lifestyle video to expose racism in universities such as Stellenbosch University, Rhodes Must Fall movement in the University of Cape Town, Open Roads at University or at Rhodes University, to mention the few, to push transformation. Lectures are conducted in Afrikaans in some of these institutions to the advantage of the African-speaking student, while non-African-speaking are listening to the translative devices that are sometimes inaudible. In some cases, translators fail to translate some of the concepts, leaving the students to struggle on their own. This cannot be justified in this juncture. While respecting the right of African speakers to be taught in their language as enshrined in the Constitution, this right cannot override the right of other students who are non-African speakers to be given their fair opportunity to succeed in education. We must take this head on and call for immediate implementation of parallel medium, Minister. Unwelcoming institutional cultures must be changed. There can never be a university in a democratic South Africa which is a preserve of one culture. It will appear, therefore, that this disproportionate imbalance has gone beyond what the National Commission on Higher Education referred to as the maximum degree of autonomy. The acceptance degree of institutional autonomy has to be continuously determined through relevant institutional structures, dialogue, while national role players and stakeholders and indicators of transformation in higher education institutions have to be developed, which is the task of the Transformation Oversight Committee with the Minister established in 2013. Universities were given the opportunity to transform. Instead, they hid behind autonomy. I want to recommend that Minister should implement as a matter of urgency the performance management agreement or the contract with the Vice Chancellors in implementing transformation targets in their respective universities. We trust again that through the higher education bill that will soon be tabled in Parliament, we'll find a proper balances between institutional autonomy and public accountability, and that the government will exercise its power and the authority in a transparent, equitable manner. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.
The Leader of the Opposition.
South African young people are facing a crisis of opportunity.
Point of order.
There's a point of order. Honourable Leader of the Opposition, can you take your seat? Honourable
Madam Speaker, when the Leader of the Opposition took his place at the podium, the Teletubby over there shouted, "Sell out." I would ask you to please rule that that is unparliamentary and ask him to withdraw that.
Honourable members.
On a point of order, Chair.
No, honourable member.
On a point of order.
Honourable member.
This white boy. This white boy mustn't come and undermine black people here.
I am dealing
that
with.
That white boy mustn't come and undermine black people here.
Honourable member, whoever in those benches called the Leader of the Opposition a sellout, can you please withdraw that? Who said that? Honourable members of the EFF, who said that? I will have to deal with this matter outside of this sitting. Can the Leader of the Opposition please take the podium and proceed?
On a point of order, Speaker.
Honourable member.
On a point of order.
What's the point of order?
This man stood today here and called one member here a Teletubby. This man must be asked to withdraw. You must withdraw. You hurt him.
Honourable member.
No.
Honourable member.
He must withdraw. You hurt him.
Honourable member.
Honourable Speaker, you can deal outside of this house. Honourable Speaker.
Honourable member.
I'm listening.
Honourable member, just take your seat. And can the Leader of the Opposition proceed?
But Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker.
Honourable member, what's the problem?
The honourable member stood up here.
No, don't tell me what happened, because I saw it and I heard it,
Yes.
and I've asked the honourable member
ask the honourable
to take
member
the
to
seat.
withdraw that.
No, I'm not going to do it. Please take your seat.
In terms of Rule 64,
can you please take your seat, honourable member?
Can you request the honourable member to withdraw that?
Take your seat.
Please, Honourable Speaker. can you please help us, assist us? Tell the honorable member that to withdraw.
Honorable member, I am not going to be led by you what to do. Honorable leader of the opposition.
May I address you, Honorable
Honorable
Speaker?
members, I know you
Honorable
discussed that you must disrupt the house.
No,
I know
unfortunately
that.
not. Whoever told you that lied to you.
Of course you didn't
Then
tell me,
you
but
must
I
tell
know
us.
it.
It's clear.
But
It's
I
very
am
easy.
saying
It's
take your
easy.
seat.
If ever you are saying we must call each other Teletubbies, we'll do that. There's no
Honorable
problem.
member.
If ever each other or each one of us can call each other Teletubbies, then we'll do that. If it's allowed, we'll do that.
Honorable member,
Please rule on that.
please take your seat.
Honorable Speaker, may I address you? May I address you, Honorable Speaker?
Address me on
It
what,
must be
honorable
noted
member?
that when things are said by the EFF, we are asked to withdraw or the bouncers are coming. But because you are in bed with the DA, you can't call the DA to order. It's in public now, it's known that you are in bed with the DA.
Honorable member, take your seat. Honorable leader of the opposition.
South African young people are facing a crisis of opportunity. Someone must fall, and if it's up to Minister Nzimande, students must fall. In fact, as far as he's concerned, listening to the address earlier on, everything is going well. The truth is, Minister Nzimande, students have fallen in the last number of years under this ANC government. Madam Speaker, honorable members, students in the gallery, Bagaetsu Dumelang. In 1976, students in Soweto rose up against an evil system that sought to deny them the right to education. A system that also sought to see the students fall. The system responded with the full force of the police. But instead of engaging the students, it sought to break them down. Last week, young people across South Africa went to the union buildings to fight the opportunity to study. The vast majority went in peace to protest against the continued exclusion of particularly young South Africans from higher institutions of learning. They too were met with the force of police brutality by a government that wanted students to fall. And I'd like honorable members to share a post by a mother who said to her daughter, if you march again, take a wet bandana with you. Your chances of getting tear gassed are increasing and it is horrible. Cover your mouth and your nose, and as soon as you hear the whizzing noise of grenades before they explode, try to get to a higher ground. Tear gas is heavy and it sinks. I really didn't expect to be teaching my children this. This post reminded me so much about how history can repeat itself. People are still mobilizing for the basic right of inclusion and access to opportunity. The struggle for education continues for decades, and after the Soweto uprising, the ANC government has indeed failed young people. Honorable members, just last week, Honorable Bladen Nzimande and the President sat here in silence while students protested outside. This is the greatest injustice of our democratic era. It is a government that has not prioritized opportunities for young people and remains silent while our campuses burn. Minister Nzimande, this is not a new crisis. It's a crisis that you've sat on for the last 2 years. It's dated back since 2010. It set out the funding crisis. So what remains to be true is that actually the hashtag must be no blade must fall. This, honorable members, includes the missing middle, the students who are left out because they earn too much, their parents earn too much but too little to fund themselves. Honorable members, I want to highlight that what the students who we are fighting for are in that missing middle. They have no money, and ultimately a 0% cap on tuition increase certainly does not change their circumstances. This crisis was created by an executive that failed to act. The president failed to act, Minister Nzimande failed to act, and now we face the consequences. But in truth, we have always held a proposal that says that the doors of learning must be open. In fact, in the 2014 DA manifesto, we were clear that no qualifying student must be left out of higher learning, and in fact should never be financially excluded. We've argued that we must create access. We must make sure no student is left behind. We must increase NSFAS funding. That therefore, we were standing in this house asking this parliament to in fact reprioritize funding. I reject the idea by Minister Nzimande that says that there's no money available. That's why he first proposed the 6%. It's clear that the ANC's priorities are in funding the BRICS Bank rather than opening the doors of learning for our students. It's clear, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, that the 720 million rands allocated to our foreign missions are a priority for the ANC to keep deployed cadres living well in foreign missions rather than funding the students. It's clear that the 69.7 million rands allocated to additional security for cabinet members that are bloated, you are self-serving rather than serving the students of South Africa. Therefore, honorable members, I am asking you, particularly to the members on my right here, that it is time that we work together and reclaim the position of Parliament. Parliament can allow the executive to table a budget that doesn't speak to the students. We have an opportunity as Parliament to amend this budget before the 20th and the 21st. Let us find the money and open opportunities for students in this country. It is our opportunity to reclaim their space as Parliament rather than simply kowtowing to this cabinet that is sitting in front of us. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, every budgetary cycle presents us an opportunity to provide young people with opportunities by funding their future. We cannot allow this crisis to go to waste.
Yes, Honorable Minister. Will the honorable member take a question as to whether he was chased by the students or not?
No, honorable member, you must let him decide whether he wants to take the question or not. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, do you want to take the question?
No.
Please proceed.
I suppose the best response is to ask, where was Minister Zulu when the campuses were burning? Perhaps living in a VIP protected household while students simply don't have funding today. Perhaps simply protecting President Zuma instead of protecting the students of this country. But Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said, universal education is not only a moral imperative, but an economic necessity. It has to pave the way towards making many more nations self-sufficient and self-sustaining. Without broad access to higher education, South Africa will not be able to achieve the goal of an inclusive and non-racial South Africa based on the values of freedom, fairness, and opportunity. Honorable members, we've come too far not to take a stand against the injustice of exclusion of young people from pursuing higher education. History books will judge us by how we deal with this particular crisis. And I urge you, honorable members, let us stand together and amend this budget so that we can find the appropriate funding. We must be on the right side of history. We must ultimately open the doors of learning and opportunity. But I guess, as I hear the rumblings from members on my side, it is clear that the dream of an included South Africa will not happen while this government is in place. Therefore, it begs a new hashtag. I guess the ANC must fall. I thank you.
The Honorable Mente.
Honorable Speaker, the reality is that the courageous struggles of students from almost all institutions of higher learning in South Africa over the past 2 weeks, fees have not fallen. We stand here as EFF to proclaim that all fees must fall in institutions of higher learning. South Africa spends less than 2% of its GDP on post-secondary education and training, and such is far less than what many developing countries in the world and in the African continent spend on education and skills of their people. As a matter of fact, the EFF is the only organization in this parliament which said in its elections manifesto, the EFF government will provide free quality education for the poor from early childhood development to the attainment of post-secondary education, and it will put it in place in mechanisms to encourage students to attain postgraduate degrees and qualifications. The founding principles and program of the EFF is that of the fighting for free quality education as one of its cardinal pillars. Since the beginning of this 5th democratic parliament, the EFF is the only organization which has consistently called for the provision of free quality education until higher education. In all our debates in education, our call has been that the state should introduce free quality education. And the ruling party, with other opportunistic political parties, rejected our demand and call for free education. Our call for nationalization of mines, banks and other strategic sectors of the economy has always been linked to the provision of free quality education. Our call for an end to corruption in all government departments, municipalities and Inkandla has been linked to our demand for free quality education. Our call for the state to decisively deal with transfer pricing, profit shifting and base erosion of billions of rands has been linked to the need for free education. Our call for the increase of corporate taxes has always been linked to the provision of free education. By the way, our election manifesto says, introduce education and training taxes from all private corporations to a minimum of 2% of the total revenue of all corporations, employing more than 25 people, and this will fund all education and training activities and programs performed by the state. When we launched the EFF Student Command on the 16th of June, the founding principle of the EFF Student Command is that of fighting for free quality education. We know that since 1994, the ruling party has made the empty promises of free education and have not lived to the commitment of the Freedom Charter that says doors of learning and culture shall be opened, and yet to proclaim that this is the year of the Freedom Charter. This is what you must be doing. Part of the immediate solutions will be the following: addressing the issue of aggressive tax avoidance, which the EFF has been bringing to the attention of this parliament, dealing with corruption that steals more than 30 billion from the budget, shelving the nuclear build program, which the ANC on my right intends to spend 1 trillion rand to build and take bribes for. Free higher education for South Africa is possible, and what is needed is the will of the politicians and introducing the free education for all. We want to know, Minister, where is the report? Or perhaps it is shelved in your alcohol cabinet home. You must bring it here. Mr. Minister, we also want to know, where were you, or perhaps you were doing a slicer when the students were standing outside looking for you and your report? Mr. Minister, you must tell the students what is it to be done from today onwards. Give the students free education. Stop sending police to the innocent and loyal students of South Africa. You must treat the students like your own children, that you take them abroad for education. They belong to the poor South Africans. They belong to South Africa. And yet, perhaps you do not understand because you can afford a better quality education.
Honorable member, can you take your seat? There's a point of order. Yes, Chief Whip.
The point of order is that the member addresses the minister as if they had a conversation. This is a debate for the whole House. She should be addressing you, not the minister.
Honorable member, do refrain from addressing the minister.
It's a point of debate, Honorable
Please
Speaker.
proceed.
We cannot leave the future of this country to be uneducated leaders because they will lead us to nowhere, like it is the case today. Free education is possible, and allow us to give you solutions on how free education will come about. Fees must genuinely fall.
The Honorable Hlengwa.
Honorable Speaker, the greatest single threat in any time of crisis is the lack or absence of leadership. And what we have come to witness over the past 2 weeks has been exactly that, an absence of leadership. Today we are called upon to debate transformation in the higher education sector. And of course there is widespread agreement which the IFP subscribes to that change and transformation in higher education is necessary for nation building, social cohesion and strengthening our democratic discourse underpinned by inclusivity and access. Such an agenda needs leaders who are fit for purpose. Since 2009, the Department of Higher Education and Training has been tripping from failure to failure, which culminated into the Fees Must Fall campaign over the past 2 weeks. In reality, the Minister of Higher Education and Training, Honorable Dr. Plain Zimande, is not fit for purpose. He no longer enjoys the support and confidence of the constituency he has been deployed to serve. NSFAS is in a perpetual mode of chaos and remains largely untransformed, and thus being a big letdown for its intended recipients. Therefore, the Honorable Minister must do the honorable thing and he must resign. South Africa can ill afford to continue on this slippery slope of incompetence and failure. The nerve, cheek and audacity of the minister to quip that students must fall speaks volumes about the lack of seriousness he ascribes to the concerns of the students. And this must be condemned in the strongest possible terms. The Honorable Minister's gaffe was insensitive and indicative of a minister who is out of touch with and detached from reality. Furthermore, the utterances of the Deputy Minister of Police, Honorable Mekusoku, must be seen in the same vein of insensitivity, but escalated to a higher level of concern because on her watch, the police meted out brutal force against unarmed students, taking us right back to the apartheid style of policing last seen in 1976. Acts of violence and destruction of property seen during the past few days are totally unacceptable and gives the Fees Must Fall campaign hallmarks of chaos and not progress. To the Honorable Minister Zulangpet, and akwazi umuntu omdala ofana nawe ngathi ngiyabheda. Zihloniphe nje, uhloniphe nobuwena ukuthi asikhulume indaba ezibaleka ngaka zokuhlupheka kwabantu abasha eNingizimu Afrika, and your only solution ukuzongihahameza ungitshena ukuthi ngiyabheda. I think now finally yourself you must fall. We are out of order ungqongqoshe wonke kahulumeni. Indlela oziphethe ngayo igculisi neze neze. Umdala kangaka uzothi ngiyabheda. Ungqongqoshe wonke athi ngiyabheda umdala kangaka. Unjani manje? Free education must be at the forefront of the benefit of the poor, and we must resist everything possible whereby education becomes for sale for those with deep pockets, leaving the poor, struggling and vulnerable, languishing in socio-economic conditions and a political wilderness where they cannot make their lives better. Fees must fall in the genuine sense of the word, and the 0% fee increment does not speak to fees falling. Sadlalwa ngathi nje ingwanekwane imbudane abantu abasha abanikezwe imfundo yamahala njengoba befuna. Ngiyathokoza
Somhlonishwa. May I take this opportunity to appeal to the gallery not to participate by clapping. You are very welcome as our guests, and we would appreciate it if you just refrain from participating by applauding whoever. May I now call upon the Honorable Mncwabe
Honorable Speaker, honorable members, honorable ministers. The recent mass action led by students from institutions of higher learning across the country has sharply brought into focus the challenges and lack of transformation in higher education. The mass action also brought into question the autonomy of universities and the role of government in the transformation of higher education. The major issues that were raised by students centered largely on fees and the cost of attending universities, the slow pace of transformation in universities, and racism which is still prevalent, either openly or concealed. The Constitution of our country provides in Section 29 that everybody has a right to basic education, and importantly also gives an obligation on government to make higher education progressively accessible within the limits of its resources. The student, honorable Speaker, reminded the ANC government of this obligation. The government's announcement last week that there will be no increase in fees for 2016 is cold comfort for the students who have risen up and asked for what is rightful theirs. Free higher education for the deserving is the ultimate aim which the students strive for and which we should all embrace. For when we invest in the higher education, we invest in the future of our country. Issues of transformation within many of the institutions of our learning are another concern which the students have raised. Not enough is being done to ensure that black academics achieve positions of seniority in our universities, nor the curriculum of these institutions reflective of the South African society at large. The National Freedom Party supports the call of students that our universities need to accelerate their transformation to become the truly reflective South African society. Racism, our bitter legacy of colonialism and apartheid, is still alive 21 years after we have achieved our democratic freedom. It is unacceptable that dignity of any South African should be impaired on the basis of his or her race. And this social evil must swiftly be rooted out whenever it is found. The NFP will encourage the students to continue to be vigilant and expose racism whenever they come across it. Finally, Madam Speaker, the NFP wholly supports the core demands of students. It is important that the government now reassess the low priority it has thus far given to the transformation of our education and make available the necessary resources to provide our deserving students with quality, free education. I thank you.
The Honorable Kwankwa.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker and honorable members. We should all take a leaf out of the students' book because during their protest they were able to rise above narrow sectarian interests to fight for a common cause, something which is becoming rarer and rarer in our national politics. The second lesson is that apart from other political dynamics that were at play, the rejection of political parties during the student protests, though strategic on the one hand, pointed to a yawning disconnect between political parties and voters on the other. Colleagues, it is clear that we have some soul searching to do. Coming back to the theme of today's debate, the United Democratic Movement supports the students' call for free higher education, and the reasons are as follows. First, government has room to eliminate wasteful expenditure in its departments, which runs into billions of rands annually, and to reallocate the money to tertiary education. Second, government should compel universities to be transparent about their cost structures and to identify opportunities for cost cutting. Furthermore, steps should be taken to ensure that institutions of higher learning are transparent about and accountable for their use of public funds. The Auditor General must get to a point where he audits the books of universities. Third, government should redirect some of the money that is sitting with sitters to higher education and to make free education a reality, as these sitters are increasingly becoming ineffective employment agencies for the ruling party and its cronies. Fourth, on transformation, Honorable Minister, ensuring access to higher education is only one aspect of a complex problem. Government should address issues of racism in the sector, issues of an alienating institutional culture for the majority of students, concerns, I beg your pardon, concerns around the lack of advancement for black academics, and general concerns about the language of tuition in some of the universities. While still on the subject of transformation, Mr. Minister, I wish to ask you two questions. The first question, of the universities that have been placed under administration, how many of the administrators are black? The second question is, how many black consultants have been used by these administrators over the years? Fifth, we propose that the task team that has been established to look into the provision of free higher education be opened up to other civil society organizations and other relevant stakeholders. Fellow compatriots, the time for political blame game is over. We must now work together to put forward a comprehensive plan that will ensure through free education our children are able to escape the vicious cycle of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Indeed, fees must fall. I thank you.
The Honorable Mulder.
Madam Speaker, there's a saying in English, the chickens are coming home to roost. In Afrikaans we say, wat jy saai sal jy maai. Prior to the 2009 election and again at this Mangaung conference before the 2014 election, the ANC promised free tertiary education, creating expectations. But up till 2015 did nothing about it. Now the chickens are coming home to roost. How do the ANC get away with it? By brainwashing voters to blame anything but the ANC for their problems. From white capital or new colonialism or apartheid, you know all the words. The Honourable Minister of Higher Education, as the General Secretary of the SACP, is excellent at this. Normally he just puts the blame for any problem on anti-majoritarian, counter-revolutionary forces. I've heard him that say. But sir, I do have sympathy with the Minister. The Honourable Nsimande has for the past 20 years agitated for a popular revolution. When it finally arrived, he was on the wrong side, the receiving end of trying to make it. And trying to make a speech and shouting amandlas through the fences around Parliament. So who are the real authors of this mess? I must congratulate the students that this time they were not brainwashed or fooled. They immediately set the real authors of this mess, the ANC government, in their sights. So they marched not to other places, to Luthuli House, to Parliament and to union buildings. The ANC initial feigned solidarity with the students, and the ANC's call on its members to join the protest did not fool the students. At Luthuli House, Jesse Duarte and Gwedi Mantashe still tried to blame the vice-rectors. That did not work. All that they succeeded was that the cry, fees must fall, went to ANC must fall at that stage. So in this campaign, fees with a rally call. But everyone knows that it's about a broader anger at the government which only makes promises and fails voters. Meneer, die Vryheidsfront Plus veroordeel geweld, studentengeweld, ook politiegeweld. Enkele politielede het onnodig geweld gebruik hierso. Ek dink omdat hulle so min was. Ek het egter self gesien hoe politielede geskop en getart is aan die ander kant. Meneer, toe die studente by die parlement die hekke breek, het ek die ANC-lede aan daardie kant van die raad dopgehou. Hulle het met groot en benoude oë gesit en gehoor hoe die studente al nader kom en die geskreeu kom tot by die deure van die parlement. Minder as 10 polisielede het voorkom dat die studente hier ingekom het in die parlement. Maar wat doen die ANC? Geen dank aan die polisie nie. The ANC's Moloto Mutapo said in a media release, we completely and outrightly condemn the heavy-handedness of police. The students presented no threat. Nou as dit waar is, dan wil ek vir die polisielede daar buite sê, en ek hoop hulle kyk by televisieskerms ons polisie. Volgende keer, as hulle weer hier aankom, dan staan julle op sy. Julle help die studente binne die parlement in, hulle is mos nie 'n threat nie. Ek sal hier binne vir hulle wys watter ministers en watter uiteindelik mense is die verantwoordelik is met wie hulle moet hulle ding doen. Sir, at the moment, we all took part in that, and we are also for fees as it is done and been done. We are grateful that the fees will not be increased. But the fact that the ANC has dragged its feet to address the problem has now created a financial, untenable situation. I thank you.
Honorable Likota.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Today, I think we must forget about a 0% increase, because 0% increase next year means increase year after next. We don't want that. We want zero fees. When our forebears promised that the doors of learning shall be opened for all, they meant that all the children of this country will have to have access to education without all this drama that's going on. Many of us followed our seniors into exile, onto Robben Island and other prisons with burning orders in search of the right to have the doors of learning opened. Having come to government in 1994, year in and year out, we have budgeted increasing amounts of money so that the doors of learning are opened for all the children of this country, black or white. That has not, today it stands at 6% of GDP, the money we budget. Now, the big problem here, why there's no free education now, which we should have been progressing to, is because the ruling party is mismanaging our funds, they are misusing public funds, they are not doing with it what we give them to do. At the end of the fourth democratic parliament, I stood here and I asked you, I asked you that question because in the first term that you were in 83 plus billion rands, you could not explain on the record as demanded by the Auditor General. As we stand here, we are only 2 years in this term. As we stand here, you are already 62.7 billion rands into fruitless and futile expenditure. We must ask you this. You've been wasting this money, creating the impression there's no money to give education to each and every child in this country. But that has been this wastage that you've been doing. All this money. But that is not all. By the way, that is not all. If there was any doubt in anybody's mind about this, the second issue is that we do not need, this country with 50 million people does not need a cabinet the size of the student body of the University of Limpopo.
Member, your time is
expired. It's got to be reduced and the departments must be cut down so we divert money towards education. If we don't do that, there's no future for our children for this country. Your time has expired, Honorable Likota. The Honorable Kasim.
For too long, Minister Nzimande and the ANC government have ducked any responsibility for the crisis suffered by mostly poor students across this country. And whenever the legitimate anger of our students rears its head, the ANC's lackeys, namely SASCO, hastily turn it away from government and towards universities. It is no wonder that this blunt honourable minister, his reactions to students is crisis. What crisis? We have seen, Honourable Minister, these protests every year and we have been a part of it. We have seen shutdowns longer than what we have seen in the past 2 weeks. Last year, during one such shutdown, the DA staged an all-night sit-in outside your offices. We then continued to warn you about the crisis snowballing and challenging you to commit that no student will be excluded. You laughed in response. Again this year, again you laughed. Now, as students finally ask a very legitimate question, who be Blade? And chant, Blade must fall. And yet again you continue to laugh, cruelly chuckling, students must fall. You and your government's day of reckoning has come, and yet you remain oblivious like a frog in a pot of boiling water. Indeed, the ANC's call to join the students to the union buildings, busing in students and throwing around T-shirts is not only hypocritical, but insults the intellect of the South African electorate by being disingenuous. We see you marching against yourselves. Did you not think that we'd notice that even you think you are failing? And I find it quite strange that in this entire debate, not a single ANC member of the Portfolio Committee of Higher Education and Training is even trusted to speak at this platform. I have said it before, and I'll say it again. You, Honourable Minister, have become a curse to the students of our country. You have destroyed NSFAS through planting your SACP cronies, and you have done the same with the SETAs. You have failed to secure funding for higher education, as is your job. Please don't come and tell us about this meeting you had with students at the Higher Education Summit. We know what you said. You told students, go and tell Treasury to give money. It is not the job of students to tell Treasury to give money. Why do we have a minister? And now, this has resulted in universities resorting to outsourcing workers and raising fees. It has also meant a gross lack of funds for poor students who are being excluded or riddled with massive debts, and indebted graduates unable to access their certificates and find jobs. Many students in the so-called missing middle are left in the lurch, apparently too rich to access NSFAS and too poor to get a student loan. NSFAS promised us a plan. You probably don't know about it, Minister, but we are still waiting. All the while, you are more concerned with leading the SACP than doing the job you are being paid to do. The reluctance of the ANC government to take any responsibility for this crisis is best epitomized in the opening remarks of President Jacob Zuma on Friday, asserting that the protests are between students and universities. It is of no surprise that this farcical meeting, designed as a PR exercise with SASCO leaders instructed to say anything but hold the government to account, has produced no reprieve for students that will remain excluded. The 0% fee increase trumpeted by the ANC does not do justice to the collective struggle of students. Government refuses to commit to funding our universities appropriately, and yet students remain excluded and indebted, workers exploited, and fees remain high with double-digit increases from the previous year. This will not change until either the ANC government's priorities are corrected or the ANC falls. Since leadership is beyond your government, let us provide it for you. Number one, shuffle Honourable Blade out. The SACP can have him all to themselves. Increase the state subsidy to universities and NSFAS to support poor students up to a postgraduate level. Convert NSFAS into a bursary upon completion of a student's studies. Provide state sureties for those students who cannot access financial aid but require a student loan. Provide mechanisms for public accountability at universities while still preserving institutional autonomy. Scrap the bureaucratic SETAs and ensure that the skills money are better served to skill our people. Higher education and training is the best investment a government can make. And let me assure you of something for those on the right-hand side of this house. The fees will fall. The only question is, what will fall first, the fees or the ANC government?
The Honourable Mkongi.
Honourable Speaker and members, I am not surprised that the political opportunism of EFF and hypocrisy of the DA have raised its head again today. They are both in an unholy alliance of deceit and showcasing. The fact is that, as a consequence of the sustained attacks against the ANC and transformation by the DA and some sections of the media, we are standing at this crossroads today. The DA endless and unnecessary court cases against the state is eating the fiscus and taxpayers' money. Since 1994,
Madam Speaker,
the Democratic Alliance has been fighting transformation and change through courts, including on important matters of higher education.
Honourable Mkongi, can you take your seat? Yes, Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, is the Honourable Mkongi prepared to take a question?
Yeah, unaxesha mfondini awuyifunde nosithethayo. Since 1994, The DA has been fighting transformation and change through courts, including on important matters of basic education and higher education. And today they come here and grandstand as if they are a viable alternative. What is so surprising? What is so surprising today, even parties who do not have free education as the base of their policies have an audacity to stand here and demand free education. One of the important achievements of the 2015 student struggle was the unity of the students themselves, especially the non-racial significance of the marches and protests. This should be welcomed. It should be said, though, that we have also witnessed the emergence of anarchists and hooligans who are attempted to hijack these noble struggles of students for criminality and criminal actions, wherein both the public and private property became targets of these charlatans.
What is the point of order, Honorable Member Mkongi, please take your seat. What is the point of order?
I just want to check whether the honorable member will be prepared to take a question.
No, honorable member. A point of order is a point of order. It's about procedure. It's not about a member taking a question or otherwise, but he doesn't want.
We are aware that some opposition parties and foreign countries who are opposed to the cause of the South African people and the ANC have taken to themselves to finance anarchy and hooligans in South Africa. They are funding and financing some sections of youth and students to cause chaos in this country. Therefore, we call on all young people, especially our students, to be vigilant during these trying times. We know that these foreign forces are using some sections of desperate students, giving them money not to write exams. They are mobilizing for arcanism and hooliganism to emerge and therefore destabilize our hard-won peaceful democracy. It is against this background that we need to remind all students that students are members of society before they are students. Their aspirations are intertwined with the strategic interest of the nation. Their challenges cannot be divorced from the collective aspirations of the broader needs of society. Their defeat in their conduct of a revolution and the masquerade of victory is a threat to progress and defeat of our collective drive for a better life for all our people. Therefore, students should never betray the moral standard of which our people expect of them to observe. They should not be tempted to conduct struggles that are going to undermine the overall victory. Students of our country must not allow themselves to be used by foreign hooligans and foreign institutions to destroy and destabilize our country. It is not in their immediate and future interest to do so. Having said that, allow me to take this opportunity to remind the nation.
Point of order.
What's the point of order, honorable member?
The honorable member must never undermine the student and say that they've been used.
Honorable member, I
think it's totally out of
honorable member,
order.
that is not a point of order. It's not a point of order. Honorable member, a point of order is about procedure here in the House. Please proceed, Honorable Mkongi.
Having said that, let me take this opportunity to remind the nation that the struggle for better and free education in South Africa is not a new phenomenon of the 21st century. This struggle is an epitome of the generations of the struggles of young people in South Africa since the birth of the African National Congress Youth League in 1944. Why we can boldly say today that the ANC know the problems and the ANC is dealing with the problems. In fact, all the generations following the 1994
Point of order, Speaker.
What's the point of order?
If the ANC knew problems of students long time ago, would have never had protests for
Honorable
2 weeks.
member,
So the
that
ANC
is
must
not
not
a
come
point
here
of
and
order.
grandstand. You are grandstanding and you know it.
Honorable
Your
member, that's
government
not
is
a point of
incompetent.
order. Proceed, Honorable Mkongi.
In fact, Speaker, all the generations following the 1944 generation of youth made it their generational mission to achieve, to deal with the problems of our country. These generations of militant young people in this country could not achieve free quality education under the apartheid colonial regime. They knew that they will never achieve it under the apartheid and colonialism. Their role was to strengthen the hand of the African National Congress in the struggle to defeat the apartheid colonial regime as a guarantor to free quality education for all. As a matter of fact, on 14 December 1943, the ANC adopted African claims. I quote, "The education of the African is a matter of national importance that requires state efforts for its proper realization. The magnitude of the task at hand places it beyond the limits of resources of the state, missionary, or private endeavor. The right of the African child to education, like all of other child in society, must be respected and recognized by the state. The African child is subjected to serious educational, political, economic disabilities and discrimination, which are chief cause of their apparent slow progress," close quotes. Thus, since the capturing of the beachhead in 1994, the ANC has put in place laws governing higher education system in this country as an instrument to realize the above-mentioned commitments made by past generations. The ANC, as the leader of society, is therefore called upon to take the nation on board to fulfill this mission. This is a collective task of all South Africans. It should be observed by all sectors of society. It is not only an ANC task to fulfill a generational mandate. If you don't fulfill this mandate as a nation, the democracy we've built since 1994 could be in danger. It should be communicated that since 1994, some government policies for change in higher education has been met with fierce opposition and resistance from some sections of academia, of university managers, especially by historically white institutions, in partnership with some sections of print white media. Some political parties in this House has made their business to fight transformation in all its forms. As a result of the lack of transformation and the systematic introduction of exorbitant fees at these institutions, our students had to be left with no option but to resort to go to the streets to call for fees to fall. These students are correct because they are not even consulted by vice chancellors. The ANC and government did not increase fees. Fees were increased by university management. Therefore, the continuing commercialization and commodification of public universities by university managers in South Africa is a daunting challenge. It needs to be attended to. By the way, it is a conscious intention to deny access and limit the state hand on matters of higher education provision. Some vice chancellors and university managers have become a law unto themselves. They do not respect the will of the people. Thus today, we are called upon here to reflect on these matters.
Honorable Mkongi, your time has expired.
Thank you very much.
The Honorable Reverend Mishwe.
Madam Speaker, South Africans agree that tertiary education in South Africa has become very expensive and unaffordable for most students across diverse communities. That is why the ACDP has supported and will continue to support the legitimate demands of students and their non-violent protests. We have noted with great disappointment that over the years, rather than increasing financial aid for tertiary education, government has been reducing it. We agree with the Vice Chancellor of the University of the Witwatersrand, Mr. Adam Habib, that a decline in government subsidies has led to most universities needing to increase fees to ensure that the quality of education in their institutions is not compromised. The ACDP therefore calls on government to revise this negative trend and start prioritizing the educational needs of the future leaders of our country. The ACDP believes that poor funding of universities undermines the National Development Plan, which places education at the center of efforts to deal with unemployment, inequality, and poverty. It is estimated that about 2.6 billion rands is needed to cover the funding gap due to the zero increase for 2016, which has been guaranteed by the President. The relevant question that has been asked by many is, where is this shortfall of 2.6 billion rands going to be found? While government is looking at all possibilities, and universities are also looking at reprioritizing and making adjustments to their programs, we also need to consider the impact that corruption is having on robbing our nation of urgently needed resources that should be used to finance tertiary education in our country. It is estimated that approximately 30 billion rands per year is lost to wasteful and corrupt government expenditure. If this figure was recovered, it would cover not only the shortfall, but would also fund free quality tertiary education. Additionally, it was reported by the Global Financial Integrity last year that South Africa is losing roughly about 147 billion rands per year to the illegal movement of money out of the country. The ACDP believes that government should urgently find innovative ways to stop all illicit financial outflows from our country. These illegal outflows, together with funds lost through corruption, are monies that, if recovered, could be used to give our students the best possible education, while ensuring that their qualified and experienced lecturers receive competitive salaries for the work they are doing. Despite the success of the free fees must fall protest, there are some who unfortunately want strikes to continue until free education is guaranteed. This does not bode well for students who want to write their exams and for those who hope to graduate this year. The ACDP would like to echo the voices of those calling for all students to write their exams and encourage those expected to graduate to do so. This will ensure that this academic year is not lost and that 2015 ends on a high note, which is justice and affordable education for all university students in our beautiful country. Thank you.
The Honorable Gallo.
Honorable Speaker, the AIC have been founded by the poorest of the poor people from the rural households of Matatiele on 12 December 2005. After having been disappointed by the old liberation movement in this country, mostly for not keeping the promises this movement is making to the people of this country year in, year out during elections. Free quality education should have been the first priority of the democratic government post-1994. The nation cannot be free with an education system that is in tatters. This country was led by value-based leaders like Fidel Castro in Cuba, it would have covered a lot of ground in terms of education and social transformation. In the 1950s, the Cuban government's corruption led to Fidel Castro's violent rise to power. And the day of the victory of the Castro's revolution, led by Fidel Castro himself, in 1959 led to the establishment of the present government in Cuba. Since 1961, the education system in Cuba is 100% subsidized by the government, meaning that Cuban students at all levels can attend schools for free. The Cuban government has been investing a substantial part of its budget into education for many years. Cuba is a communist state. Honorable Minister, are you not a red communist? That is the question. According to a 2014 report by the World Bank, Cuba has the best education system in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the only country on the continent to have high-level teaching faculty. South Africa can do the same if the political will is there, Honorable Speaker. Otherwise, the introduction of free quality varsity education for the poor in the rural households is feasible. We must not be told that Rome was never built overnight. We are tired of those political cheatings. We want action in this regard. The AIC would advise the president to downsize his cabinet by 50%. That will save a lot of taxpayers' money, and the money could be invested in education. Reduce the number of provinces into 4 and save plus minus 10 billion each financial year. Any profit generated from government-owned entities like ESCOM, Transnet, etc. must not pay fat bonuses to CEOs. Thank you.
Honorable Hlowama.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Those who are calling for the resignation of the Minister of Higher Education, Blade Nzimande, have no understanding of this problem. The Honorable Minister is a victim of circumstances. Circumstances caused by apartheid South Africa. All the minister can do is to run like a headless chicken and apply cosmetics and semantics, while the status quo remain the same. What is needed, honorable members, is a total overhauling, a radical approach towards the institution of higher learning. Serious government involvement to clean the sticking past of institutionalized racism. Education that still make our people to feel inferior. All we need, honorable members, is a free quality education to be implemented with immediate effect. We need bold and courageous leaders who can implement radical decisions to create an environment which support those who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And our people and our young people will not sit for long, and they will not remain beggars in this country for long. Therefore, a very serious and very, very brave leadership is required. The biggest sin which I think the ruling party did was to believe that after 1994, everybody, including even those who benefited from apartheid, believed in our democracy. Therefore, after 1994, they will change and become good people. What we have learned from now is that we still have those who are still defending the remnants of the status quo of the past. Therefore, knowing very well that having a quality education to young people, this will actually propel them to a human development, which is the path which they are not interested at. A quality education is the only hope that most of our young people have to pull themselves out of their misery. Free equality education is the only answer, period. And then we as Arang SA, we say the private sector must pay half, and the time of nursing and begging the private sector must come to an end. I thank you.
The Honorable Mbinda.
Honorable Speaker, the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, it has always been our belief that education should be free to all, and we have been very consistent on this. It gives us joy that the South Africans, especially the youth, has learned to understand our preachings together with other progressive forces. We must remember that Uncle Zef, the second president of the PAC, he was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment for leading the student uprising. And at that time, he was still 65 years old. So this government, it has been preaching also a free education for all since crafting the so-called Freedom Charter in 1955. And leading to 1994 general elections, they were screaming their lungs out, promising our people free education amongst the promises made. Over 21 years of being in parliament, this government is unable to account to South Africans how far they are in implementing their promises. It is utter disrespect to our people that tax teams and committees will be constituted now because of the current national student protest, as they say to us. Nothing has been done since 1994, and that is an insult to our young people. Secondly, Speaker, it is worth mentioning how untrustworthy is this government to the people of this country. There is a false norm that South Africa cannot afford a free education, and it's popular within the circles of the ANC. And our concern is, when did they realize that education is not affordable? Was it before 94 or was it after 1994? The reason is that it seems we cannot afford free education is the fact that we are not in charge of our own economy as South Africans. Section 25 must be repealed because the Constitution on its own is holding the nation at ransom. We must be in full controls of our mines, farms, economy, and all other strategic means of production. And the profits we make there will be more than enough for us to offer our youth with free education. Tax invasions by these multinational companies, corruption, you see, they amount to trillions that can be pumped into attaining free education. The usage of luxury and extremely expensive vehicles, hotels, and so forth. President Zuma and Nkandla expenses are too much for us to tell children that there is no money to go to school. The monies that we are using, Deputy President, to buy buffaloes for millions and building retirement homes for hundreds of millions, and tell kids that there is no money, otherwise Abantwana will laugh at us. So if students are correct to demand what was promised, let's stop calling Amapolisa and run away from realities. Indeed, if fees must fall now, not during our lifetime. They must not confuse you about our lifetime.
Linda, your time has expired. Honorable Godi.
Honorable Speaker, comrades and honorable members, the transformation need of higher education cannot be looked at in isolation from the transformation deficiency of the whole country. Like the mine workers uprising in 2012, the student activism is sending a loud message that the consensus of 1993, which had not substantively changed the apartheid social pecking order, resting on the shoulders of the suffering African people, has run its course. We need, as a country, a new consensus, a far-reaching social transformation to give substantive and material meaning to the freedom that we have. The issues brought forth by the students have given the nation food for thought. As the APC, we believe that all the issues raised by the students have merit. The African people constitute 80% of the population of this country, but this is not reflected in the culture, curriculum, template of knowledge production, staff and administration in many universities. The APC believes that free education at tertiary levels is possible and desirable. There is need for serious reprioritization of our spending patterns, curb corruption, waste, duplication, and maladministration. That is what government must do. What about the private sector? About 70% of this country's economy is in the hands of the private sector. At best, the capitalists have been indifferent to progressive change. The APC believes that government should increase greatly its stake in the economy to create jobs, reduce inequality, and generate the necessary resources to fund social services like education. The APC believes that education from primary to tertiary level must be strongly regulated to ensure that tertiary institutions are in line with national goals. Autonomy of tertiary institutions needs to be reviewed. We need greater public accountability on how funds are used, whether their priorities and spending patterns are prudent and economic. We need a new paradigm away from capitalism. For under capitalism, everything is commodified, including education. Yes, fees must fall, so must capitalism. Thank you.
The Honorable Pozzoli.
Madam Speaker, through you I direct my comments directly to members of the ANC. Today should be a day of accountability for what has happened to higher education, and your party is accountable. You have done to universities exactly what you did to ESCOM. When you first came into power, you respected universities. Your Higher Education Act of 1997 praises university autonomy, creativity, and research. Our first three presidents had a love of ideas and an admiration for intellectuals. But you also wanted to dominate universities. It was part of your overall agenda of controlling the commanding heights. But that pesky university autonomy that you had put into the Act was an obstacle. So you went behind the scenes and manipulated the appointments of vice-chancellors, and today you have an almost tame cohort, in spite of your complaints, and you interfered in councils. You did this with the support of your shock troops, the Amaleiters of SASCO. You mobilized the pain and hardship of the poorest students and used them for your own ends, to build the ANC and to extend control over universities. The student leaders were rewarded, as you will see around you, with government posts and memberships of parliament. But the shock troops themselves, the majority of poor students, remain poor. You doubled the number of students in universities, worthy indeed. But you did so with no regard for the quality of the education they were getting. You used universities as places where the youth could be parked and their energies channeled away from you. After the Malema-sponsored election of President Zuma, your respect for universities diminished to vanishing point. The president today thinks they are expensive, unpatriotic places full of clever blacks. Vice-chancellors can be publicly humiliated with barely a squeak from you. There is a whiff of the Cultural Revolution about. And funding, while you threw money at grandiose projects and the bill for corruption grew exponentially, the funding for universities fell in real terms by 30%. Your Higher Education Act failed here. It did not define the levels at which universities must be funded. You commissioned formal inquiries into funding, and all of them said it was a crisis waiting to happen. You ignored them. Minister Nzimande, your self-congratulatory speech here is not appropriate for this occasion. So universities were subjected to constant protests year in and year out, mainly about funding. They included looting, vandalism, the burning of buildings, and intimidation of staff and students. And we still see that today. You could turn these protests on and off, usually for a price from universities. And this was actually done, according to the Wits students, this week. The protests there were turned off by the ANC. You encouraged the belief amongst poor students that universities could solve all their problems, and you inched further towards control over them each time. Every year, the universities became degraded by these attacks on them, and the problems were always insoluble without more money. What a breath of fresh air the fees must fall movement has been. Students saw through your games, and suddenly protest was directed at you, and you failed to rise to the challenge. You seem to have very few practical solutions to the short or long-term problem, no mention of a new norm for the level of funding, no way of making up for past neglect, no pledge to find money elsewhere in your mismanaged budget. Instead, you've tried to change the subject. The private sector must pay, universities must pay, the department must pay, SETAs must pay, taxes must be raised, and we heard today fees must be regulated. No effort required on your part, we notice. We are victims of our successes, says Minister Nzimande. Victims. You are in charge and you have been for 20 years. You have failed to accept responsibility for this disaster. Instead, you're busy restoring the old regime, universities as places to be manipulated, despised and attacked. SASCO as the natural holder of the right to protest, preferably violently. President Zuma hated every minute of his announcement. You are going to make universities pay for his undignified humiliation. In retribution, you will subordinate universities even further. You dislike the fact that no matter how much manipulation you used behind the scenes or mayhem you caused, universities have not been bent fully to your will. And so you now attack university autonomy, as F.W. de Klerk did in 1982 when he was Minister of Education. You encourage students to believe that this would be a solution. It would not. It would not magically supply more funding. It's a millenarian dream, like all your dreams of nationalization are. The DA will do everything in its power to prevent the destruction and decay of universities and protect their autonomy. Those who love education are disgusted at your thoughtless lack of care for these precious national assets. Thank you.
The Honorable, the Deputy Minister of Higher Education.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members of Parliament, students and student leaders, distinguished guests, fellow South Africans. Thank you. Thank you very much. The events of the last 2 weeks saw a generation of students across the political spectrum defining their moment in history, calling on their government to make sound interventions to their education and training by helping cap fee increments for the 2016 academic year. They further pleaded with their government to urgently put measures to realize free and quality education for the poor. We have listened to the cries of our young people, and to this end, we will be employing extraordinary strategies to realize the strategic goals we have set ourselves for, fully understanding the critical role that education and training can play in liberating our people from unemployment and poverty. Our government, led by President Zuma, did not hesitate in putting short-term measures in dealing with the plight of students because we remained inspired by their zeal and commitment as they almost emulated the determination of the 1976 generation to succeed in their struggle and bring about a turning point in our country's higher education system. At the same time, we must admit that all of us have been humiliated by a small number of young people who had sought to hijack this noble struggle of students and allowed themselves to lead criminal attacks against the state and its institutions. We must individually and collectively condemn this practice, as their conduct is nothing more than acts of criminality at best and barbarism at worst. Fellow South Africans, for a considerable period of time now, our progressive student formations have been involved in a protracted struggle to realize free and quality education for the poor, as asserted in our Freedom Charter, that higher education and technical training shall be open to all by means of state allowances and scholarships awarded on the basis of merit. This was further given impetus by our policy position as the African National Congress that free and quality education shall be extended to the poor at least until undergraduate level. This protest, therefore, had sought to highlight the need for government to expedite efforts to ensure that there is progressive realization of free and quality education in our lifetime. The current fee structure of privileged universities has reached absolute elasticity and is beyond the reach of the poor and marginalized communities. And as government, we assert ourselves that the high fee increment above inflation rate is indeed unjustifiable and simply unbearable for our poor students. It would be disingenuous of me, Madam Speaker, if I did not mention that in the last 20 years, we have been able to grow the education sector exponentially, and in that, this government has ensured that 90% of TVET students study for free at TVET colleges, and that successful final year university students that are NSFAS beneficiaries have their final year fees converted into full bursaries, fostering funding linked to academic excellence. Though these are incremental efforts, honorable members, towards free education, but more of our young people still experience financial exclusions because they are highly indebted to institutions, of course, coupled by the fact that funding for our higher education system remains acutely inadequate. This important task occurs in a reality in which South Africa is the most unequal society in the world, punctuated by stubborn unemployment rate and poverty, afflicting a significant proportion of our society, especially the youth who constitute the majority of the population. What is to be done? Firstly, we have to urgently explore ways and means to improve funding for higher education, and in this connection, the department will approach National Treasury to effect reprioritization measures in order to fast-track the attainment and realization of free education for the poor. Secondly, in considering the many proposals, the one of increasing the skills levy as articulated by the Minister will be put on the table as we explore the possibility of ring-fencing some of these resources in order to fund higher education, whilst being mindful of the fact that approximately 16 million unskilled youth are dependent on the levy for skills acquisition in order to enhance their employability and participation in the economy. Thirdly, whilst we remain deeply concerned, honorable members, by the palpable silence of the private sector in the current discourse about funding for free higher education, perhaps this is the most appropriate time for us as the department working with National Treasury to seriously consider the proposals for corporate education tax directed especially at JSE-listed companies and profitable business entities. Big business may have surely realized the nature and power that students possess, especially when they are resolute in their convictions. We therefore expect no hardlining stance from the side of business as we embark on these processes, because your contribution will go a long way in improving the skills of our poor people so that they can develop themselves as well-rounded individuals. It's funny, Honorable Kasim, that today for the first time you made proposals but chose to exonerate business from taking part in the education of an African child. Honorable Speaker, I have undertaken to work closely with student formations, and we will start with national roadshows early next year, visiting institutions and communities to explain and outline a clear roadmap to free education and the realization of other matters that the President raised when addressing the nation last Friday. This will be amongst many quick feedback mechanisms that we will develop so that you are kept abreast regarding our efforts and progress in this regard. We also wish to send a sterling warning to our universities never to allow institutional autonomy to be used as a buffer to drive necessary transformation in the education system. We need to take radical steps to balance institutional autonomy and public accountability, but as well strengthen our polities by first guaranteeing the right to academic freedom as enshrined in the Constitution, but demand more accountability, especially for decisions that have dire and ripple effects on our country. Once again, we thank the President of the Republic of South Africa as head of government for his swift intervention that has ensured a zero-fee increment for 2016. The President has pointed out other important matters which the sector must deal with, and we undertake to work with all stakeholders in dealing with these matters. By the way, Honorable Maimane, DASO was part of the meeting that was convened by the President, and they did not oppose to all the proposals that were put on the table. Fellow students of our South Africa's universities, you led a noble fight a fight for a right to education. We witnessed visuals and images of students united in their diversity, placing on the national agenda the issue of affordable higher education. We in government, despite this trying time, remained fearless and did not panic because we understood your call to be that of reminding government, your government, to fast-track the goals and objectives it has set itself for. I now urge you to return to class and start working towards preparations for examinations. We have agreed that examinations will be postponed and a new timetable will now reflect new dates. We request all of you to allow the academic program and activities to resume, and we congratulate all universities that have managed to reach out to students' demands by putting in place plans and measures to address these issues within a reasonable period. As students, it is more an obligation to yourselves than a right to write examinations, and therefore do not allow yourselves to be persuaded otherwise. We also urge parents to support us as we address these legitimate demands and aspirations of our students. Good luck with your examinations. It has been a long week in the streets, but I am sure you will excel beyond measure. Forward with free education in our lifetime. Thank you very much.
The Honorable, the Minister of Higher Education.
Honorable Speaker, I'm very disappointed with the opposition. They are so flat-footed, actually. I don't know what they said, except populist grandstanding. The DA doesn't even have free higher education in their policies. But because it sounds like it's fashionable, they are coming actually to come and say free higher education in order to try and appear relevant. In fact, strangely, the only one honorable member I come close to other than it's Honorable Gallo. It shows at some stage he flirted with the SACP in the Natal Midlands because he comes closer to the truth that capitalist societies are often unable to fund free higher education unless, or with the exception of welfare states that we actually know about in capitalist societies. That comes closer to the truth because it comes to what we were saying and what the Deputy Minister was emphasizing now, that we do need to confront the issue of the role of the private sector, and we need decisive action by government. Honorable Hlengwa, I really try and avoid grandstanding of the IFP, because when we start taking the history of the IFP and the education struggles in this country, there are lots of problems. All I can say, we are far away from Ubuntu Buto syllabus of the KwaZulu government, which we have changed and done away with. You remember what your party did when COSA students marched in Kwamashu in 1979? And today you come and grandstand what happened at the University of Zululand in 1983. So it is and we have come a long way from that because the African National Congress imposed peace, including in KwaZulu-Natal. The DA, honestly, Honorable Pozoli was at the summit, kept quiet. I never heard you talking because it was safe when the stakeholders are there. We have been silent on racism in universities. We have been silent in institutional culture. And in fact, the DA admonished DASO for the removal of Rhodes statue here at UCT. Yes, you were clashing with your own organization. Why are you denying that? We are not sending students to Cuba. And I don't like this thing, Honorable Kasim. You can disagree with me, but don't come and say something that's not true. I never said the students must march to Treasury. I'm not an opportunist as a minister that I will say students must march to my colleague. I never said that. You can disagree with me. The fact of the matter is that you have no solution to the problems facing this country. That we have not reached the goal of Free higher education does not mean that we are not going there and we are increasing the budget year in, year out. Ukongolose loyo. Not ama opportunity. EFF ayikho ke nento engayisho ngapha.
Honorable members, that concludes the debate. Honorable members, earlier in the sitting, the Honorable Chief Whip of the Opposition rose on a point of order, contending that the leader of the opposition was called a sellout when he approached the podium. He then proceeded to ask that I request the Teletubby to withdraw the remarks. I must state that raising a point of order and coupling it to equally unparliamentary language is wrong. As the presiding officer, I cannot rule on remarks that I have not heard. I therefore did ask the honorable members of the EFF to indicate if they had made the remark attributed to them by the Chief Whip of the Opposition. No one took responsibility for the remark. As such, it is not possible for the presiding officer to rule on the matter unless it can be verified by Hansard and attributed to a specific member. Honorable Steenhuisen, I therefore now turn to you to ask you if when you used the words Teletubby, you were referring to a specific member of this House. Honorable Steenhuisen.
Madam Speaker, I couldn't work out whether it was Tinky, Winky, Lala or Poe, but I withdraw.
Honorable members, given that the Honorable Steenhuisen has withdrawn that remark towards a member of the EFF, that concludes that matter. However, we still remain at sea on the issue of the sellout remark, which is regrettable. The Secretary will read the second order, the second to the fourth orders together.
Introduction, Taxation Laws Amendment Bill. Introduction, Finance Bill. Introduction, New Development Bank Special Appropriation Bill.
The Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Today I'd like to take this opportunity to formally introduce and table the following bills in the National Assembly. The first is the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill 2015. The second is the Taxation Administration Laws Amendment Bill. The third, the National Development Bank Special Appropriation Bill for 2015-16 financial year. And there are two, Honorable Speaker, that are not money bills: the Financial Sector Regulation Bill of 2015 and the Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill of 2015. As I said, three of these are Section 77 bills, whilst the others are Section 76 bills. Honorable Speaker, the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill and Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill 2015 forms part of the second set of tax legislation which gives effect to the tax proposals that were announced as part of the Budget 2015. The first bill dealt with the rates and the thresholds, and this bill contains the more complex and substantive tax amendments from the 2015 budget review. An extensive consultation process therefore ensued where to allow all stakeholders to provide inputs and comments on the draft bills. With the able help and the support of the Standing Committee on Finance and other role players, this process has proved to be very productive. After the one-year delay recommended by the Standing Committee on Finance last year during 2014 Taxation Laws Amendment Bill process, the reform to harmonize the tax treatment of all retirement fund contributions will be implemented as scheduled from the 1st of March 2016. This will ensure greater equity in our tax system by limiting the tax deduction to a maximum of 350,000 rands for all taxpayers. However, whilst there is extensive support to proceed with annuitization of provident funds in the 2016 budget, subject to a higher de minimis threshold, government is aware of the need to win the full support of all labour federations in the interest of the long-term security of their members. As a result, an urgent and short consultation process has been initiated to deal with a new amendment related to the timing of the annuitization requirement for provident funds.